the first thing I noticed was not her uniform. It was the way she stood outside the cafe door like she was preparing to apologize for existing. Her shoulders were tired, her hair was pinned back in a messy knot, and there was a small coffee stain on the sleeve of her faded blue work shirt. The name stitched above her pocket read Mara, and beneath it were the words Bramwell City Hospital. She looked at me through the glass with frightened eyes, as if the entire world had already judged her before I even got the chance. When she stepped inside, the lunch crowd turned for half a second. Not because she was strange. Not because she was ugly. But because her shoes squeaked against the floor, her uniform carried the smell of disinfectant, and she looked like someone who had run straight from a battlefield into a place full of polished cups, soft music, and people with time to breathe. She came to my table, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I am sorry, I wore my work uniform." And before she could explain, before shame could drag her back out that door, I stood up and said, "I still want this date. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet beauty of people who keep showing up even when life is heavy, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Dad Stories. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that may need them today." My name is Callum Ray, and by the time I met Mara Vey, I had become very good at pretending I was fine. I was 38, divorced, raising a 12-year-old son named Arlo, and working as a daytime delivery supervisor for a company that sent groceries to people who were too busy, too sick, or too lonely to shop for themselves. My life was not tragic in any dramatic way. It was just quiet in the places where laughter used to live. My apartment had clean counters, unpaid bills clipped to the fridge, and a dining table with 3 chairs even though only 2 people used it. My ex-wife had remarried a man who owned a lake house, and Arlo had started measuring my worth in careful silences, never cruel, never angry, just aware of all the things I could not give him. The blind date had been my sister's idea. She told me Mara was kind, hardworking, and not impressed by nonsense, which sounded less like romance and more like a warning. I almost cancelled that morning. Arlo had forgotten his science project, one of my drivers called in sick, and a customer screamed at me because her strawberries arrived bruised. By noon, the city was bright and hot, that sharp kind of daylight that makes every dent in your car and every wrinkle in your shirt visible. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, wearing my best gray button-down, trying to look like a man who still believed something good could happen. Then Mara arrived late, still in uniform, with exhaustion written into every step. She began explaining before she even sat down. There had been an emergency at the hospital. A patient had fallen. Another aide had left early. She had tried to change, but her locker key broke, and the bus was late, and then she thought about going home instead because no one wanted to meet a woman smelling like antiseptic on a first date. Her words tumbled out fast, like she had spent her whole life apologizing before people could reject her. I asked her to sit. She did, carefully, as if the chair might not belong to her. At first, the date was awkward in the way first dates often are. She kept smoothing her sleeve over the stain. I kept trying not to stare at how tired her hands looked. They were beautiful hands, but not soft. They were hands that lifted people, cleaned wounds, changed sheets, held plastic cups to trembling lips, and probably went unnoticed by everyone except those who needed them most. When the waitress came, Mara ordered only water and said she was not hungry. But I saw her glance at the sandwich board. I ordered 2 bowls of soup and told her I hated eating alone. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her face loosened. The more we talked, the more the cafe disappeared around us. Mara told me she worked the early shift at the hospital and sometimes picked up extra hours at a nursing home when rent was tight. She had a younger brother, Soren, who lived with her after aging out of foster care. She had raised him since she was 19 because their mother had loved pills more than mornings and their father was a man whose name nobody said without anger. She spoke about Soren with a fierce tenderness, the way some people speak about miracles they almost lost. I told her about Arlo, about the divorce, about how fatherhood was like walking through a dark room holding a candle and hoping your child believed the light was enough. By the time the soup arrived, Mara was laughing. Not loudly, not freely yet, but enough that I saw the woman beneath the tiredness. Her laugh had a surprised sound, as if joy had knocked and she had opened the door without meaning to. Outside, sunlight spilled over the street. A bus hissed at the curb. People crossed with iced drinks and shopping bags, living ordinary daytime lives. And there we were, two bruised people sitting across from each other, realizing that maybe we had not missed everything after all. But the moment broke when a woman at the next table leaned toward her friend and said, not quietly enough, that some people should learn how to dress before going on dates. Mara heard it. Of course she heard it. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. The color drained from her face, and I saw shame fold itself around her like an old coat. She whispered that she should go. Something in me, something long asleep, woke up angry. I did not raise my voice. I simply turned to the woman and said that Mara had spent her morning helping sick people stand, breathe, eat, and feel human, and that if the price of that was a wrinkled uniform, then it was the finest outfit in the room. The cafe went quiet for one breath. Mara stared down at the table, but I saw tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. The woman looked away. I turned back and asked Mara if she wanted dessert. That was the first day. The second date was a walk through the city park during her lunch break. She wore the same uniform, clean this time, and brought 2 apples in a paper bag because she said hospital cafeteria food could defeat even the strongest soul. We sat on a bench under a plane tree while sunlight moved through the leaves. She told me she used to dream of becoming a nurse but had put school aside when Soren needed a home. I told her I used to play guitar in a band before responsibility taught me to be practical. She asked if I missed it. I said only on days when I remembered who I was before I became useful. She smiled sadly and said she understood that too well. Weeks passed. Our dates stayed simple because neither of us had money to waste. We met at food trucks, library steps, bus stops, and once in the hospital parking lot where we shared vending machine crackers after her shift ran long. Arlo met her by accident one Saturday when she came by to return my jacket. He was suspicious at first, the way children are when they fear happiness might be temporary. But Mara did not force charm on him. She simply noticed his model airplane on the table and asked what kind it was. He spoke for 20 minutes. She listened like every word mattered. That night, he said she had kind eyes. Still, love did not arrive like music in a movie. It came with fear, bills, cancelled plans, and old wounds. Mara missed dinners because someone at work needed her. I snapped once because I felt second place to a hospital hallway. She snapped back that people did not schedule emergencies around my loneliness. We stood in my kitchen in the harsh afternoon light, both breathing hard, both terrified that the other person had finally seen too much. Then she started crying, not dramatically, but with the exhausted defeat of someone who had been strong too long. She said she did not know how to be loved without feeling like she had to earn it. I said I did not know how to ask for love without feeling like a burden. And somehow, standing beside a sink full of dishes, we forgave each other. The real test came in October, on a bright weekday that began too beautifully for what it would become. Arlo's school called while I was loading delivery crates. He had collapsed during gym. By the time I reached the hospital, my shirt was soaked with sweat and my hands were shaking so badly I could not sign the intake form. The waiting room smelled like fear and floor cleaner. Nurses moved quickly. Children cried. Parents whispered into phones. I kept seeing Arlo at 6 years old, holding my hand to cross the street, trusting me to stop every car in the world. Mara found me before the doctor did. She was on shift, her uniform creased, her badge swinging against her chest. She did not promise things she could not know. She just took my trembling hand and guided me to a chair. She brought water. She spoke to the nurse. She stood between me and panic with the calm strength of someone who had practiced courage in public every day. When the doctor finally came, he explained that Arlo had an undiagnosed heart rhythm condition, frightening but treatable. He would need monitoring, medication, and maybe a procedure later, but he was awake. I cried when I saw him. I tried not to, because fathers think they are supposed to be walls, but I broke anyway. Arlo looked small in the hospital bed, annoyed by the wires, pale but alive. Mara stood near the door, giving us space, until he asked if she was there. She stepped forward and told him he had scared everyone badly and would therefore owe her one extremely boring documentary about airplanes. He smiled. It was the first time I breathed all day. After that, Mara became part of our lives in a way that felt less like romance and more like shelter. She helped me understand medication schedules. She taught Arlo how to explain his condition without embarrassment. She checked on Soren, worked double shifts, fell asleep on my couch with her shoes still on, and always apologized when she woke. I began keeping a blanket there just for her. Arlo began leaving the good pillow. One afternoon, months after our first date, I went to the hospital to bring her lunch. It was daytime, the sun pouring through the glass entrance, turning the polished floors gold. I saw her at the end of the corridor helping an elderly man walk. He was leaning heavily on her arm, each step a battle, and she moved beside him with patient grace. She did not know I was watching. She did not know how beautiful she looked. Not glamorous. Not polished. Beautiful in the way a lighthouse is beautiful during a storm. That was when I understood. The uniform she had apologized for on our first date was not something that made her less worthy. It was proof of who she was when nobody was clapping. It carried the story of every life she touched, every hour she gave, every tired morning she chose compassion over comfort. I had spent so long thinking love would arrive dressed perfectly, at the right time, with no complications. But love had arrived late, in squeaking shoes, with a coffee stain on its sleeve, asking to be forgiven for being real. On the anniversary of that first date, I took Mara back to the same cafe. I wore my delivery uniform because I had come straight from work. She laughed when she saw me, and I told her I was sorry. I had worn my work uniform. Her eyes filled before I could say another word. The same waitress, older by only a year but smiling like she remembered everything, led us to the same table. Arlo and Soren were hiding badly near the window, pretending to study menus. Mara noticed them and covered her mouth. I did not make a grand speech. Life had taught us both to distrust things too shiny. I only told her that the day she walked in ashamed, she gave me the chance to choose the person instead of the packaging. I told her she had loved my son through fear, loved her brother through abandonment, and loved me through the ruins I kept pretending were not there. Then I asked if she would let me spend the rest of my life making sure she never had to apologize for being tired, human, or dressed in the evidence of her kindness. She said yes in a whisper so small that only the people who loved her heard it. But the cafe erupted anyway. Arlo cried and denied it. Soren hugged me too hard. Mara laughed through tears, and for one bright moment in the middle of an ordinary day, the world felt gentle. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Silent Dad Stories. Sometimes one kind choice can change the entire direction of a life. Special request: comment kindness still matters if you believe people deserve to be loved as they are. Years later, when people asked Mara what she wore on our first date, she would smile and say, "My uniform." And I would always add, "The most beautiful dress I had ever seen." Because love does not always arrive sparkling beneath chandeliers. Sometimes it arrives in daylight, exhausted and unsure, smelling faintly of hospital soap, carrying someone else's pain on its shoulders. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can say is not "I love you." Sometimes it is simply, "I still want this date."